Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host, Rafe Mair. Welcome to the show, Rafe.
Nice to be here, Jim.
So I understand the Prime Minister has already set his schedule for debating the other leaders, and it's online. He's not going to do the traditional television debates for the October election.
Well, he'll be sorry, I think. It's not, no matter what his explanations are, the public aren't going to take it as being chicken. That's just the natural thing to do. That's what, we would all have said in the schoolyard, and I don't think we've ever got out of a mood. If you're not prepared to stand up and speak for yourself, then you're a chicken. And I think that's what's going to come out of this. And I think the big benefactor or beneficiary of this, well, two of them, I suppose. Of course, Elizabeth Green is going to benefit from this.
Elizabeth May,
I'm sorry, yes. Elizabeth Green, that's not a bad one, is it? And, of course, Thomas Mulcair, who's on a roll anyway, is certainly going to benefit from it.
What about Mr. Trudeau?
Oh, I left him out deliberately. I didn't want to embarrass him. I think he, from what I'm reading in Quebec, he slipped very, very badly, but I think he's proving not to be the right man, and I think the C-51 killed him. I said so at the time that, you can't walk away from these things. The Liberal Party has always stood for human rights. His father brought in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. How the hell can young Trudeau walk away from it and say, well, we'll support it, but if we get in, we'll change it. I mean, it's gutless. It really is, and I think it's seen as that. And I think a lot of Liberals across the country are not feeling very good about that.
Mr. Mulcair, I think, has proven that he's a worthy leader.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. He got off to kind of a slow start, I guess. But, the NDP they're not expected to be really in the thick of it. Notwithstanding their great enthusiasm and so on in the past, they've never shown to really be very much. They always have a white knight, like Jack Layton is going to lead them out of the woods, but doesn't really make it at the end of the day. But Mulcair, when he broke in to being the leader of the opposition and made such a huge hit in Quebec, I think he established himself as a real player. And quite frankly, Jim, I think that a lot of the media, including me, didn't pick this up as quickly as we should have. And I think he's in a good position. Now, mind you, I've got to say thank you very much to Mulcair, because I've always been told that people with beards couldn't get elected to anything. And since we both have beards, he's a pal of mine.
Well, what about Mr. Lincoln?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Abraham. As a matter of fact, I got to tell you, I ran in 3 elections, got and won all of them. So there you are.
I think Mr. Disraeli also had a beard.
Yeah, we're not in bad company, actually.
You're not in bad shape at all. And what is the NDP victory in Alberta going to do to the Conservatives federally?
Well, I think what it's done is it's shown people across Canada that it can happen. I don't think it means if you're, in Toronto or Montreal or Halifax or somewhere, you suddenly say, oh my goodness me, this means the NDP are going to win. But what it does, it says, look, these guys really are players. If they can win in Alberta, they can win here and anywhere else. And everybody likes to back a winner. I know you're supposed to back the person you think is going to be the best. And I guess we all try to do that. But it sure helps if they look like winners too. And I think he's really raised, I think, the level of enthusiasm, optimism, and so on. And I think he's raised the realistic opportunity that the NDP could actually win in Canada.
And I haven't heard from the NDP what I would call their traditional Eat the Rich program from him. He seems to be pretty reasonable.
Well, I think that's the new NDP anyway, and it probably has spilled over from New Labour in England. It took a long time to get rid of that hard left wing and the term working man image. I mean, people that are working people don't like to be called working men because it has a sort of an image that people don't like. And I think Mulcair has understood this and has seen the PR value and looking like somebody that almost anybody would like to have to dinner. and wouldn't mind his son marrying their daughter, vice versa. In other words, he's beginning to look not like we envisioned the NDP leaders in the past, but looking like sort of an everyday sort of guy that kind of middle-class guy that you could trust.
Why would Mr. Harper avoid the traditional TV debates?
Well, I guess he's scared stiff, Jim. You know, everybody's going to be bombarding him, of course, but the problems are no longer the usual ones where somebody asks him about the environment and he can spit off a bunch of stuff and, you know, it goes off and on into the ether and nobody really pins him down or anything. But he's got 3 or 4 things now that he can be really badly pinned down on. And I think a lot of Canadians really are worried about the guy. They think that this man is a potential dictator. Now, I don't know whether he is or isn't, but I do know this, that C-51, as every day goes by, gets more and more Canadians concerned. You know, it started out to be a popular piece of legislation at the very beginning, as you'll remember. Well, it sure as hell isn't now, and I think the people that have spoken against it and written against it have been listened to, and I think Harper's just in the position he says to himself, well, look, I'm probably going to be, you know, I'm going to be thought of very badly if I don't go to that debate, but it's going to be worse if I do.
Well, I'm just thinking of the Republican convention where Clint Eastwood questioned an empty chair.
Well, I wonder whether they do that. That would be kind of interesting.
Where, you know, well, his space is there, you know, it's available.
Yeah.
And why is he only wanting to do it on or in venues that he has personally chosen?
Well, I guess that's, the comfort zone, and he wants that comfort zone, and I guess also that way he feels at least his own supporters will be supportive of him. They'll see him there, and they'll say, well, it's okay, and at least they've got an argument that he was somewhere and people are going to see him. And I guess the other argument is, too, is anybody going to watch the remainder? Well, I think probably they will, because I think, as we just mentioned a moment ago, Jim, a lot of people really want to see what Mulcair and Elizabeth May are all about. And I think it's going to be well viewed.
Well, the Prime Minister had a perfect opportunity to come to Surrey in British Columbia, where virtually every night there are shootouts between rival gang members, and they announced that they're going to be hiring more RCMP officers and will throw a little cash in to help maybe educate kids not to join gangs. But I thought with him being a law and order kind of guy, that would have been a perfect opportunity for him to come to British Columbia and maybe explain his policies.
Yeah, you would have thought he would have sort of come riding in on a white horse and waving his 6 shooters and saying, I've come to save you and bring you some money and bring you some help because I am on your side, good citizens. But he hasn't done that, and I don't know, Jim. It's hard to read. You know, I've looked at a lot of elections over a lot of years, and I hate to tell you how many, and I've never seen one where the Prime Minister seems to be quite as unsure of himself as this time. It's really very, very unusual. Even Lester Pearson, who was never very comfortable being a politician, he looked more like a leader, and he certainly didn't show fear. But I just got the feeling that Harper is showing fear, and whether you're a dog in a fight or whether or not you're a person, that's not a good thing.
Canadian press covering the federal election campaign has brought in what they call the baloney index, where they take leaders' statements and then they see how much truthfulness is in it. Well, Harper is on ads saying some political leaders now, he doesn't name particular parties or individuals, say they would take away the child tax credit and the direct payment of money to parents. Well, none of the leaders from the NDP or Liberals or the Greens have said that they would plan to do that. So who are these some politicians he's talking about?
Well, I don't, probably himself. It's one of those things that has always appalled me about politics anyway, even when I was in the thick of it, although it seemed to be, in retrospect, it seemed to be a little more civilized. But when you get down to this kind of dirty politics, some of it sticks, and that's the hard part about it. And we'll see more of it. We'll see a lot more of it before that we're finished, and probably we'll see it from all the leaders. Sad to say.
We'll have more with Rafe Mair right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Rafe Mair. Rafe, it appears Elections Canada is going to be gagged under the new Fair Elections Act. They won't be able to go to schools and explain to students how the voting process works, or even run ads promoting the fact that maybe you should get out and vote. What kind of a message is that sending?
It's not a very good one, is it? It's always frightened me, Jim. This speaks really to a much bigger issue. Kids simply are not taught how our system works. They're taught in the sense, well, this is the way it should work. This is the way it works on paper. This is what the term responsible government means. And these are the powers of an MP. But what they don't say is there really are no powers of an MP and the system doesn't work. So when you have the Elections Canada come along and saying, well, look, at least let us tell the kids how to vote, where you can vote, et cetera, and you don't let them do that, you've really left kids in a vacuum. It's a little wonder when they graduate from school, they think, well, it's really probably not much bothering to vote. I remember speaking to the Occupy movement in Vancouver a few years ago, and there are a whole bunch of them there, and I said, listen, if you guys you'll go 1,000 miles to demonstrate, if you walk 100 yards across the street to vote, you'd get something done. I got booed and jeered and hissed, and it's sad. It's coming out of this whole, I know I broadened your question, but it's come out of this whole lack of decent education in the schools, plus the fact, as you and I know, looking at the way the country is run and the parliamentary system doesn't work, there's no good example to set. So when you come with the one sort of Santa Claus in the group, the elections people who really are above the fray, and you won't let them talk, it's appalling. It really is. It goes to show you really how little respect those in power have got for the system and for democracy.
I know when I turned 18 in Alberta, where that's both the federal and provincial voting age, I couldn't wait to cast my first ballot. I thought, this really vindicates you or shows that I'm an adult now and I have some say.
Well, I felt the same way, and I remember very well back when I did vote. I voted against WAC Bennett, but the only one that did. But I was exactly the same way. I couldn't wait to vote, and it's cynicism is set in. But I'll tell you a little story. A couple of years ago, I gave a speech to a teachers' conference, and a lady teacher came up to me afterwards and said, well, you sound like you don't really understand the system. I said, well, what is the system? So she started to explain it to me in traditional terms, as I was saying, about responsible government and the powers of the MPs. I said, but ma'am, you know that's a lot of crap. You know that there's not a word of truth in what you said. You're teaching those kids something that is Alice in Wonderland. Well, she said, we really have to, because if we didn't, they'd be so cynical. And I thought, my God, cynical? No wonder they're cynical when they come out, when they hear all of this rubbish in school, and they come out and see the real world, take a look at it once, you'd say, get out of here. Now, I don't know how old you are, Jim, but I know when I was had to first vote, it was 21, so we're back in the early 50s. There really was a sense that your MLA or your MP was somebody important, somebody to vote for. You listened to what they had to say, and you tried to decide who was the better person, etc. But now kids are understanding, and it's the truth. It doesn't matter who the hell you vote for. The party that's in power is going to run things, and if you vote for the party in power, you might as well have a fence post with hair. And this is the cynicism. It's a lack of education, and then a big shock that comes to them when they find out how it really is. And it's very, very sad. I feel very badly. Here I am in my dotage, and I just wish to hell I could do something about it. I can tell you this, Jim, I hope I'm not taking too much of your time, but I belonged to the XMLA club for some years, and they came up with an idea of going into schools to teach kids how the system worked. So I said, well, what are you going to teach them? Are you going to, we're going to teach them how to table a bill and all? No, but no. Are you going to tell them how it really is, how the cabinet works and how the backbenchers have no power whatsoever? The Premier's idea is to keep the make-work project. Oh, no, we can't tell them that. And I asked them a series of questions, the realities. Oh, well, no, we don't want to tell them that. I said, well, count me out. You guys have got a hell of a chance to really do some good because you're experienced, you know the system, and you know that what I've said is just right, but you're not going to go and tell these kids the truth. You're going to go and make believe. So, Jim, that's the problem, I think. We just haven't faced up to the reality with kids, and they sense it, and when they get out, they have it proved to them. It's sad.
Well, we do see so many real examples of big corporations controlling government, and I think they really have the feeling that the Warren Buffetts of the world do run the world. So
and they're right.
So why bother voting for anybody?
Well, they're right. You only have to take a look at what General Electric achieved with the rivers in British Columbia, thanks to their cozy deal with Premier Campbell. You know, we've got rivers all over the province being ruined for private power, which gets sold to BC Hydro for 2 or 3 times what it's worth, and 10 times what they could afford to pay for it themselves. And it's all because of a cynical deal made with the government with General Electric. And they're all pawned off as mom and pop operations. Well, if General Electric is mom and pop, I guess they are. But this is the kind of thing kids see. Now, in the very beginning, they don't see it because they haven't learned enough yet. But they get this impression that everything is going to be just fine and so on and so forth. And they get out and they look at this. And, you know, just as you were saying to me, they're obviously looking at it and saying, why do I want to get involved in that? What's the point? How can I vote when I'm voting against Warren Buffett and that sort of stuff? It's just too much, and we've got a lot of problems on our hands.
Well, I'm just thinking in Vancouver too. Is the mayor in the hands of the developers? Well, when Robertson's marriage fell apart, he went and slept on the couch of Bob Rennie, one of the biggest real estate developers in town, and you wonder, is he in the pocket of Mr. Rennie? Or are they just private friends but business separate?
Well, you know, it doesn't much matter because the appearances are what count in politics. It doesn't matter what the real reality is, and those were bad optics at the time, and well, Robertson survived them, so I guess I shouldn't say anything, but I thought at the time that those are lousy optics, but there you are. Federal
government scientists are gagged. They cannot tell us what their research has found. Does that concern you?
Oh, of course it does, Jim. I guess I sound like old man Mose, but I'll just take you back to the 80s with the Commando Completion Project, which I fought like hell for a long time. And the scientists in the Department of Fisheries and Oceans had done a report on the Nechaco River, and it essentially said, don't go near it, don't touch it, don't dam it, don't do anything to it. And that report was buried in the for the conference that took place between the feds and Alcan and the provincial government. It was buried, never publicized, it never came out. And they were the DFO officials. Some of them retired, in protest. Some of them were shifted. Some of them were actually retired before their time, etc. And from that moment on, and I'm not kidding you, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has been controlled by the politician. And the politician in charge at that time said that this is what the case was going to be. Well, this is extended right through the government. We shouldn't be surprised that scientists are muzzled, because that's been the way the government, particularly the conservative governments, have acted for a very, very long time. It's disgraceful, but that's the way it is, and we don't seem to want to do anything about it.
And, of course, we have the new legislation that allows the federal cabinet to override any environmental committee decision. So does this really just go along with that cynicism?
Oh, it does. You know, I just wrote an article for the Common Sense Canadian on the whole question of the National Energy Board and those kind of governing bodies that look into environmental and other matters, and sort of tongue-in-cheek, sort of like a modest proposal. I said, why don't we tube the whole works to them? They're not doing any good. They're just costing us a whole bunch of money. Somebody might say, well, how will our environment be protected? My answer is it's not being protected now, and it's costing us a hell of a lot of money not to protect it. Better off not to spend the money. And, it was tongue-in-cheek because you obviously want to have some controls. But right now, the defense of the environment is left in the hands of environmental organizations and ordinary people like the people in Burnaby that are protesting Kinder Morgan. They do that because they know there is nothing in the government that's going to help. I've been to some of those meetings, the BC federal ones, on the run of rivers that I was talking about a moment ago, back some years. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. I would rather have a root canal with no anesthetic than go to another one. I mean, they're just brutal. They're so one-sided. The fix is in. The chairman or chairwoman, chairperson, and the company are buddy, drinks before dinner together. I mean, the whole thing is just awful. So this is, of course, what has happened. We don't have any protection. The National Energy Board has had two very, very prominent people quit in the last little while, and for very straightforward reasons that these things are really a fraud. And there we are. We haven't got the protection. So I guess, although it was tongue-in-cheek on my part, really and truly, we'd probably be better off to save the billions of dollars and leave the environmental control to protesters.
It seems if you want to get politics into the headlines, you have to do like a daily show and make fun of politics. Then people pay attention to it. But until then, or until somebody literally becomes a joke, no one talks about it.
Well, we're getting a little further afield here, I guess, Jim, because I'm going to start to be a little embarrassing because since 2005, we haven't had any broadcasters, for example, that have really been holding feet to the fire. The Vancouver Sun and the Vancouver Province that once did it, once had columnists that did it. When I was in government, people like Marjorie Nichols and Al Fotheringham and Jack Webster and Pat Burns, they were brutal. They were really brutal. They're all gone. Those kind of people are all gone. So we really don't have anybody in the media that is effectively dealing with the government and letting the public know what's really happening. And, it's not a pretty gloomy program today, doesn't it? But, you really hit the sore point with me. And, as an old guy, I'm pretty concerned.
Well, like they said, nothing sexy about politics, but just wait till something goes wrong. But unfortunately, there isn't anybody to point out things that go wrong.
Well, that's the problem, and I can tell people now who are listening that when I was in government, and we're all in government, and we had these people on us, they were, as I say, brutal, and they didn't always get it right, and I'll pretend that they did. But I'll tell you this, they made us a better government, because we were always very careful what we said and did. And, when I can remember sitting in my office when I was a cabinet minister, the phone frantically ringing. It was George Masalem, the whip. And he said, "Minister, please get into the House. The Premier wants everybody in the House." And I said, "Well, what's the big panic?" "Well, Jack Webster is sitting in the press gallery." So, you knew that even though it made no sense for anybody to say, well, there was nobody in the House because nobody needs to be, you didn't even want that to happen. You paid attention, and the public was watching through the eyes and the pens of people who were watching you very carefully, and it made a big difference. That's all gone.
And, of course, this goes full circle. We don't have the tough reporters out there anymore, yet we have a prime minister who still doesn't like to be in any kind of situation where he might be asked a question.
Well, of course, that's what's happened. He's now got so that he doesn't have to answer any serious questions, and he doesn't want one to pop up somewhere. It really is sad. It's interesting too, Jim, and you'll remember some of this. I know. We all were pretty good pals. Alan Garr, who was a left-wing guy, probably still is, and used to really give me hell a lot of the time. He and I played squash together almost every morning. So it wasn't a bitter personal thing. He was doing his job, and if I wasn't doing my job, his job was to tell the people I wasn't. And I understood that, and I wasn't alone, and we all understood that. It was the way the game was played, and it was the proper way. I'll tell you, quick little story. I remember in 1975. God, that's a long time ago, isn't it? I was waiting for the election to come along. And I used to read Marjorie Nichols every night, and I just loved her because she just beat the hell out of Dave Barrett night after night after night. And I thought, God, what a great writer she is. Well, I got into government. Next thing I knew, there was an article by Marjorie Nichols kicking the hell out of Premier Bennett. I thought, what's happened to Marjorie? Next thing I knew, I was in the middle of this thing, and she was kicking hell out of me and all of my colleagues. And I thought, what's happened to Marjorie? Well, nothing had happened to Marjorie. She was just doing the same job on us she was doing on the government before us. And, it was that's a rude awakening, but it was true. And I think we were all better. Opposition and the government were all better for it.
Yes, well, you say when you have professional respect for each other for doing their jobs, during the Stanley Park 6 episode here where police officers were taking people to the park and literally beating them up. I asked Police Chief Jamie Graham some very tough questions at a news conference about it. And then I get into the elevator with him and people said, what? You got into the elevator with him and the two of you were laughing? And I said, well, yes, we both respect each other as professionals. And we were talking about the fact that we would be riding for the Kidney Foundation on a bicycle built for two the next weekend.
Wow.
Right? You do your job. You play tough, just like good hockey players do. You shake hands. And then you go and have a beer together.
Well, it's like good barristers, too. You know, you couldn't live in the field of combat day after day after day if you had to hate the other side. You know, you've got to find a civilized way to deal with things, and particularly when you're traveling, either as a lawyer or as a newspaper person or a TV person or so, and you're traveling a lot, going from place to place with the same people, you know, if you can't have a civilized respect and attitude towards them and have a beer together, it's not going to work. You're going to drive you nuts.
Yes, I respect your right to disagree with what I agree to.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, you're both trying to do your job as well as you can, and that's probably, or what has in the past made our country great. But the lack of a debate, you know, seriously, that has me bothered because, you know, somebody's avoiding questions, and you always wonder when they avoid questions, what are they hiding?
Well, you've got to understand, you don't have to understand, I know you've been there and you've seen it, Jim, but a lot of people don't understand. There are no debates in the House of Commons and no debates in the legislature. They're called that, but they're not. Nobody on the government side of the House ever says a single solitary discouraging word about the government. Nobody in the opposition makes a speech about anything unless their leader said it's okay to make it, and those points are okay to make. In the House of Commons, and probably the same thing here, in the House of Commons, in question period, the questions are given to the MPs. The speeches are given to the MPs. My MP comes out here, and his press releases are written by the Prime Minister's office. I mean, it's just a whole bunch of marionettes on a string, and it's too bad because they're good people, and they're caught up in the system. People say, well, why are they caught up? Because if they vary an inch, they get thrown out of caucus. If you're thrown out of caucus, you're out of the party. If you're out of the party, you can't run for it again, and you might as well just kiss your job goodbye. So it's a very, very bad system, and we have got to concentrate on doing something about it. And I notice that Mulcair is talking that way, and so is Elizabeth May. But it's got to happen soon, or we might just as well sit back and forget it.
Rafe, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
My pleasure always, Jim.
My guest has been Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Talk Digital Net for Twitter, and check out our popular YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Comments about the show can be sent to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.